Doctor Who is bad now. And so is everything else. I turned my fan off to record this because it's really hot and I don't have aircon because I live in the UK. So if I start sweating profusely halfway through this video, we're all just going to have to put up with it. Okay. So the Doctor Who finale happened. Yeah, it sure did happen. So... I have a lot of thoughts. I have so many thoughts that originally I was going to record this literally the day after the finale aired because I had so many thoughts, pretty much none of which were positive, but I decided I was going to sit on it, partly because I like to sit on my thoughts and really absorb them and make sure that I agree with all of my thoughts before I spout them out to an audience. I have a rule with myself about when I watch movies for the first time at the cinema. I have a 48-hour rule, so 48 hours after I go to the cinema, I cannot espouse a concrete opinion on the movie. I can talk about the things I liked in the movie, I can say that I liked it, but the first time I went to see the Suicide Squad movie in the cinema, not the good one, this one.
Seriously, the hell's wrong with you people?
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
Nothing really matters to me.
Yeah, the first time I went to see that in the cinema, I came out of the movie and I was like, wow, that was so good. Because the way that cinemas work and the way that my brain works is that you pay money and you sit in a big special seat and you get to eat popcorn and watch a new movie and there's a spectacle involved. Like, a movie has to be kind of catastrophically bad and also unentertaining in order for me to dislike it in the cinema. There are maybe only 3 occasions that has ever happened in my entire life where I have been in the cinema and gone, oh, this is a bad movie. One of those was second Fantastic Beasts movie. I would have walked out of that movie had I not been there with a friend of mine. One of the others was Passengers, which I kind of set up to fail because I went to see 2 movies in the same day and I saw Rogue One first. So, like, Passengers did not stand a chance. Ever since the Suicide Squad debacle of 2018, I have had a rule with myself about it doesn't matter how much I enjoyed something in the moment. Before I draw a concrete opinion on something, I have to give myself 48 hours to sit with it and breathe with it. Because within less than 48 hours, probably 24 hours of seeing Suicide Squad, I was like, I think that was a really bad movie. And I think I knew it was a bad movie while I was watching it, but I was just having a good time. I was very entertained by how bad it was. Unfortunately, in hindsight, it is not the kind of movie that is bad enough to be entertaining in a bad way. Like, it's not a rewatchable movie. You can't rewatch Suicide Squad. It's fucking unbearable. Even though I had many, many thoughts after the Doctor Who finale, I kept them to myself. No, I didn't. I retweeted a bunch of tweets about it for, like, the whole week afterwards, but I was also very busy. My mum was in the country, which literally never happens, so I spent the last couple of weeks spending time with my mother before she had to leave. She's left now. Everybody say I love you, Steph. And now that I've had almost 2 weeks, over 2 weeks, to sit in my feelings about the Doctor Who finale, I can safely say my opinions were all dead on that first day. The thing is, it's not just a Doctor Who problem. I mean, obviously the big obvious things with the Doctor Who finale, the writing was bad, the editing was bad, the characterization was bad, the acting was okay, but it was worse than I have seen most of those people act before because the writing was so bad that it's hard to act through that. And look, we can point to a number of things as to why the Doctor Who finale was so incredibly bad, and we'd be right about most of them, but I think we can narrow it down to like 2 or 3 big dot points. And as Jenny Nicholson would say, I've put it into a handy-dandy numbered list. Like I said, it's not just a Doctor Who problem. It's kind of an everything problem at the moment. We're just going to look at it through the lens of Doctor Who. So, point 1, we've got to stop giving showrunners so much leeway.
It's Gizmo. He's been causing havoc in the household.
There was a Russell T Davies quote that says, every so often someone says, why don't you bring Omega back? And these things do grow in legend. They become the legend. That's the point of Wish World and the point of the Underverse, actually. It's a continuing thing across the entire 2 series that wishes and hopes come true. It's what happened with the TARDIS in the time window and Ruby's mother wishing for a lamppost that said the name of the street. She wished it into existence in an unstable time window, and now you've got the Omega becoming his legend. I sort of used the Time War to tweak the legend of Omega. A lot of things said about Omega weren't said in the original series. You have to accept that 40 years have passed. The Time War came along and everyone's history got changed, so that's what Omega is now. You can reinvent it. There was plenty of fuss made about Winston Churchill being in Doctor Who, when there's plenty of history to suggest he wasn't such a good guy, and that's always the way. Our history of slavery, our way of walking through the world, is constantly being reanalyzed, so I like to think it's the same on Gallifrey. That's happened over the eons. Omega has been recontextualized, and the story gets bolder and changes over time. We don't want to repeat the past, we want to push it forward. So that's from the new Doctor Who magazine when talking about the reality war. So George Putty retweeted this with maybe the most baffling thread I have ever had the displeasure of reading. Russell T Davies has genuinely lost it. Just quote after quote of of him admitting that he can just write anything he wants without grounding or backing up any of it in logic. He used to care about this show, I swear. Excuses after excuses, throwing around concepts like the Time War and wishing to justify writing dogshit stories, a way to make Omega an entirely different character, but keeping his name for content generation, having the road sign appear literally just because he felt like it. Stuff like this is why I cannot get interested in any future Doctor Who if he's still running it all. Please get him gone. He no longer cares about the integrity of the show. He doesn't even care about the means of basic storytelling. Is Russell T Davies even a writer anymore, or just a showman? And honestly, I think that's a big part of the problem. I love Russell T Davies. I think he was a phenomenal showrunner. The original New Who. Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, I think he did a phenomenal job. And obviously, Christopher Eccleston has his own problems with Russell T Davies that are entirely justifiable. You should go and read his biography. But as a showrunner, he did a great job. He hired writers that cared about the material and gave them enough restrictions and enough leeway to create stories, both one-off and serialized, that were phenomenally good for the canon. I think he did that with the BBC's budget and with a lot of oversight from the BBC and from other writers in the writers' room. And that created a show that will stand the test of time. It just will. Seasons 1 through, let's say, 6 of Doctor Who, because the first Matt Smith season, pretty good, are phenomenal. And Stephen Moffat was in charge of Matt Smith seasons going forward. But Russell T Davies' fingerprints are all over those. And Russell T Davies has then gone on to create other great shows in the meantime. But when he was handed back Doctor Who, I do feel that there was this sort of hubris involved, or maybe just an inflation of ego that happened that meant that he just decided he could do whatever the fuck he wanted. That Doctor Who is his playground. It's his sandpit, and he can do whatever he wants in it because that's what he feels like doing. And I think that's a dangerous way for a showrunner to run a show. I think that whenever showrunners have done this in the past, it hasn't gone fucking well. You look at Game of Thrones. They were following a canon for most of the show, and they decided that, well, we're gods and people have praised us for the last however many seasons for being geniuses, even though most of it wasn't from our genius. So we'll just do whatever and people will still like it. And then obviously it crashed and fucking burned.
Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
You look at shows like The 100, which I obviously, like, my channel is built around my love and hatred of The 100 in equal measure, and Jason Rothenberg's showrunning of that show just being unbearable. Like, he had genuinely one of the only good shows the CW has ever made in terms of characterization, storyline, like interesting shit they could do, interesting moral quandaries they could talk about, and he was so mad at the fans for having their own interpretations of it and their own reasons for watching it that he just berserk eclipsed it into the ground. And I find that fascinating because I'm not gonna say that it's all men that do this, but I'm sure that there are women showrunners who've done this as well. You look at people like Julie Plec and people like that. Like, there are female showrunners who have done a bad job. And statistically speaking, there are just going to be more men who have done a bad job as showrunner and have berserk eclipsed their good work as showrunners because there are more male showrunners of TV shows. But it is funny and interesting to see in real time the degradation of their own legacy caused by simply deciding that they are too good for the thing they're doing, or that they're so good at the thing they're doing that nobody can argue with them about it. Like, every statement Russell has released in the wake of this fucking finale that so many people hated has been this sort of self-congratulatory, it feels very masturbatory. It's unfortunate because, again, I think he was a great showrunner for a long time. I just think that when he got handed the reins back again, he shouldn't have been handed the reins back with this air of, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope. Because he's not. There are other showrunners, there are other writers of other shows that I think could do phenomenal jobs. Russell isn't the be-all and end-all of Doctor Who, and he never was. There were some phenomenal writers in those first few seasons of Doctor Who that propped Russell's show up to be what it was. And I agree that he did a brilliant job as a showrunner, and that without him, I don't think the impact would have been as intense and important. But to ignore those other writers to bolster his name and his impact, I think is deeply disappointing and just sort of reductive. Stephen Moffat is a phenomenal writer. Like, we can all joke now about how bad Sherlock was and how frustrating some of the times he writes women are and how snarky his writing comes across sometimes in that sort of Joss Whedon-y way, which works sometimes but doesn't work in other times. But he's a brilliant writer, and the reason why he gained a reputation as a brilliant writer to the point where he was handed control of 2 of the most important IPs in British history, 3 if you count Jekyll and Hyde. H. Bomber Guy has already covered that one. He doesn't need me to do it again. Oh, and he also did Dracula as well. That shit sucked ass. Anyway, the reason why he had been elevated to this level of skill and people's love for him had reached that height is because he did write some phenomenal episodes of television. He wrote some of the best episodes of Doctor Who in existence, and he did most of it under the watchful eye of Russell T Davies, because that is what Doctor Who should be. It should be the kind of show where a showrunner is in charge of the overall vision for the season, the vibes, as it were, the characterizations, those kinds of things. And all they should be doing, for the most part, is checking in with the writers of each episode to make sure that the writing is following along with that vibe. The writers themselves for each individual episode should kind of be given free rein within the confines of the restrictions they're given as an episode of Doctor Who. For example, Blink, the introduction of the Weeping Angels, written by Stephen Moffat, collectively agreed to be one of the best episodes of Doctor Who in existence. And it exists because they ran out all of the budget on the Lazarus experiment and all of the CGI they used for that, and they needed to make an episode where there was almost no CGI, there was almost none of the main cast because they cost more than having random people in, and would involve as little effort as possible. The Weeping Angels are created. History was made.
Don't blink. Don't even blink. Blink and you're dead. They are fast, faster than you could believe. Don't turn your back. Don't look away, and don't blink. Good luck.
And actually, this brings me to my second point about why TV is bad now and why Doctor Who especially is bad now. Point 2, the stakes are so big they don't exist anymore. I think the best thing you can do for a writer is give them restrictions. And I mean this with my entire heart. I don't mean Hays Code bullshit. I mean just give us restrictions. So there's this French school of writing called Oulipo, and I'm going to read directly from the Wikipedia page here, sorry guys. It's roughly translated as Workshop of Potential Literature. It's a loose gathering of mainly French-speaking writers and mathematicians who seek to create works using constrained writing techniques. The seeking of new structures and patterns which may be used by writers in any ways they enjoy. They describe Oulipians as rats who construct the labyrinth from which they plan to escape. Constraints are used as a means of triggering ideas and inspiration, most notably Perec's story-making machine, which he uses in the construction of Life, a User's Manual, as well as established techniques such as lipograms and palindromes. The group devises new methods, often based on mathematical problems such as the Knight's Tour of the chessboard and permutations. There are a whole bunch of different kinds of constraints that they do. Famously, there's the French novel that doesn't use the letter E. That is Oulipo. And we studied this at my university as part of my degree, and we did it, I think, in poetry. We might have done it in literature, but I'm pretty sure we focus mainly on poetry because poetry is something which is really benefited by throwing one big constraint at it and then having to fight your way out of it. Like there's one, I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it now, I'll look it up afterwards. Prisoner's constraint, a type of lipogram that omits letters with ascenders and descenders, B, D, F, G, H, J, K, L, P, Q, T, and Y. So you can only write with other letters. I did some of my best work while we were studying this because giving yourself constraints forces you to alter the idea in a way that can make it better. And sometimes it makes it worse. And sometimes you go, this constraint isn't working, I need to add a different constraint. But like, I have a tattoo on my shoulder. Form is never more than an extension of content. And the reason I got that tattooed is partly as a bit because my lecturer at university used that line so much that if we weren't sure of the answer to a question he posed in class, one of us would stick up our hands and say, is it that form is never more than an extension of content? Because form is never more than an extension of content, or at least it should be. Like, it's the same school of philosophy as the meaning is the method. If you've ever like read a poem and it hasn't quite sat right with you as to how it's written, oftentimes it's because they've used the wrong form. If you've ever read a novel and gone, wow, this would work better as a movie, oftentimes it's because it's the wrong form. Maybe it should be in movie form. And I think a lot of TV today is being forced into this constraint of prestige television when actually it'd be better suited to something else. And I watched a really interesting video essay recently about House MD and how the first 3 seasons of House MD were procedural television, and then the 4th season of House MD followed in the footsteps of prestige television and made it a lot more of a collective storyline as opposed to a serialized procedural week by week, new mystery every week storyline, which both benefited and screwed over the show because it was the best season the show had ever had, but then the show had no way of continuing that because they can't just go back to procedural television after that. And I think a lot of Doctor Who has a similar problem where early seasons of Doctor Who, and I'm including Classic Who in this, but in terms of like New Who, so much of them were standalone episodes with just little threads of something else going through it. Like you look at Christopher Eccleston's season and the Bad Wolf stuff was drip-fed to you all the way through it, but pretty much every episode was its own thing. And even the episodes that were connected to the final episode, you didn't know that while you were watching them. You weren't watching them thinking, oh, this is all in service of some larger narrative. You were just watching Simon Pegg be his campy little self and having a great time.
That's the truth.
You
are lying to the people.
Ooh, I love it. Say it again.
Post Chibnall Who has a problem with this. And actually, no, I think post Stephen Moffat Who has a problem with this, in the sense that so much of it feels like it's serving some big grand narrative. And that's fucking boring. You can only escalate stakes so much before they become meaningless. You look at the Avatar? My brain's mush. It's too hot. You look at the Avengers movies and how after the first one, where it's like aliens take New York, everything just escalates until it's world-ending catastrophes, world-ending catastrophes, world-ending catastrophes. And then Thanos explodes half the world to dust. Every movie since then, it's like still trying to keep those stakes high. Like Shang-Chi would have been a better movie if there was less of a CGI monster in and it was kind of just about a guy taking power back from his shitty dad. And I think a lot of Marvel movies could benefit from making the story just a little bit smaller. Point your scope down just a little bit. Just wind it in a little bit. And I think that's a huge problem with television at the moment. Movies as well, obviously. Marvel's a big proponent of this. But Doctor Who's biggest issue is that it just wants everything to feel so grand. And by virtue of trying to make every single episode feel so grand, none of them do. They all feel so boring. You look at things like Game of Thrones, where the early seasons are the most beloved, and they are the seasons with the smallest stakes. You look at things like The Mandalorian, where the first 2 seasons were great, and everything since then has just been trying to escalate stakes and keep the audience involved. You look at The Umbrella Academy, which tripped and fell over its own dick in the 4th season. One day I will make a video about that, but it'll only be at a point in time where I'm ready and willing to watch the 4th season of The Umbrella Academy again, so don't hold your breath. You look at the Walking Dead series, where they just kept trying to escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate until the audience got fed up with it. You look at Westworld, the Marvel movies, Jurassic World movies, Pirates of the Caribbean series movies. You look at the Fantastic Beasts movies, where everything escalated in every movie until you're tying every single character back to the original Harry Potter series that's going to take place in 80 years from the future of those movies. And that's not the movie anybody signed up to watch. Like, the first Fantastic Beasts movie was fun for most people because it's just Newt Scamander doing funny, silly little things. The more they tried to tie it into the big story, the worse it got. And also, J.K. Rowling is a bigoted piece of shit, and I live by that. Supernatural, which had a perfect 5-season arc, and then kept going, and then escalated everything to the point where it's like, once you've fought Satan himself, or God himself, how do you come back from that? Where do you go after that? How do you cycle back down to small stories? And they did sometimes, but they didn't do it nearly enough. And then you look at all the reboots of classic teen shows, like Gossip Girl, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Pretty Little Liars, Riverdale, The Winx Saga, Titans, where like so much of those reboots is in not necessarily pointing and making fun at the original versions of the show, but by being so much bigger. The stakes are so much higher. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina can't just be that Sabrina is modern and darker. It has to also be that everything's about actual Lucifer. You know, the Gossip Girl series can't just have a bunch of rich people in New York bitching at each other. It has to also constantly remind you that we're woke now in a way that makes the show actively less woke. Like, legitimately fascinating to watch all of these shows and movies get bigger, and by getting bigger, the stakes become non-existent. And I think a big problem with how this is done is because we keep giving them huge budgets. Point 3. We have got to stop giving huge budgets to things. Friendly Space Ninja has already made multiple videos in the last couple of years, usually at the end of the year, on movies that have not recouped their costs and why that's bad for the film industry. So I'm not going to talk about films too much, but TV shows also need to stop spending so much fucking money. That Lord of the Rings show on Amazon that's like the most expensive TV show ever made is borderline unwatchable. And I know that because I watched the first season and then went, oh my god, this sucks ass, and never picked it up again. The House of the Dragon show is perfectly fine, but it would be better suited to, if not a smaller budget, then a budget that at least looks smaller. Not everything deserves a huge budget. So much of this video is going to boil down to give your shit some constraints. That's it. Like, give Russell T Davies some constraints. Give the writers in episodes constraints. And give the budget some fucking constraints. I mentioned Blink earlier, and about how the constraints existed because they blew half the budget on the show on like 2 episodes of television. And so then they had to go back to the writers' room and be like, we don't have budget left. Make episodes that constrained to a tiny, weeny budget because we don't have any more money left. Like, and it made some of the best episodes of the show. And I don't think that you should stop funding TV. I don't think that you should not give shit your money. But when I'm so ingrained in Asian television, right? Since 2020, well documented on my channel, I got into K-dramas. By virtue of getting into K-dramas, I got into queer television, specifically BLs, GLs, QLs, and watched a bunch of Thai dramas, Japanese dramas, Chinese dramas, Taiwanese dramas, Hong Kong, Vietnamese, so many Asian countries are putting out exclusively gay content. And then you go on Twitter in the US or the UK and you see all these people being like, nobody wants to support or bankroll gay content. And it's like, literally watch anything from Asia. But anyway, Thai dramas, compared to like American shows or even British shows, have negligible budgets. They have very little and they have to sort of do what they can. And they are getting more budget as the years go on. I think from what I've seen, the new show currently airing, The Prince, is I think the most expensive BL ever made. And it is looking very fancy and big and expensive. But I'm kind of less interested in it because of that. The show is fine, but it feels like they put more energy into the spectacle than they did into the writing. And that's kind of bumming me out. Because the one good thing you can kind of always guarantee in a Thai drama is that even though the budget is tiny and sometimes the audio mixing is absolutely fucking god-awful, and sometimes it's a bit silly because of the low budget, it will always be intentional. There is some thought put into it because they need the show to be good enough that people will watch it. Like, these writers and these creatives need to plant their feet in the industry, so they need to keep creating good things, or at the very least, passable things. And I'm not saying that Thailand doesn't release its own amount of absolute slop garbage dribble. They fucking do. I've watched all of it. But watching those shows, I'm not thinking constantly about how much less of a budget they have than American or British or Australian shows. I'm just not. I'm watching it, enjoying the performances, enjoying the storylines, enjoying the few times when they can flex the budget. Some of the best artistic decisions have been made when they've had to follow the constraints of the world around them. Bad Buddy, notably my favourite of all of the BLs. I go on about it so much in this video. A lot of the decisions that were made on that show were made because of constraints in filming. The big famous kiss scene at the end of episode 5 was like literally the last thing that they filmed for the show, and they filmed it at like 4 a.m. because it was pissing down rain for hours before they could get outside to film it. And it suits the scene so unbelievably well.
โอ้กับวันนี้
ไม่ช่วยทั้งของแต่มันคือความพิเศษเอ้าไปซะแล้วมันคือความพิเศษมันดึกแล้วมันควรจะง่วงมันคือความพิเศษนะแต่ละก็ยังชุดใจ
I also think we need to stop making everything so fucking short.
We don't have time to unpack all of that.
We need to let shows breathe in terms of episode length as well. I think filler episodes are good. Not filler episodes the way that they are supposed to be used, in the way that, like, you know, that is just like an actively a waste of time and you're not improving anything. Filler episodes like Lost had. I watched the Mike's video on Lost a while ago, season 3, and he talks about how, like, there were some really great episodes of Lost that people hated because they came out at the wrong time, right? Like, there's all this new lore drop that's just been revealed about John Locke, and then the next episode is an episode about 2 characters that nobody cares about, and people got pissed off and referred to it as a filler episode, and it's like, well, actually, no. That's not a bad episode of television, it's just in the wrong place in the season. If you just shifted it somewhere else, the audience response to it would have been much better.
We just had this crazy episode where Locke blew up the submarine. We found out how he broke his back, and his evil father Anthony Cooper has popped up in a random room in the other's village after fuck-ass Queen Ben has been yapping about a magic box. So what was everyone hoping for this episode? Well, it certainly wasn't an episode all about Nikki and Paolo. I think people hating this episode at the time was warranted. It would have been so annoying. It's also just frustrating storytelling to bury huge plot points with a character episode, especially after a shaky first half, and then we finally start building momentum, and here we are. But I'll also say I don't actually hate this episode. It's actually a pretty good episode, excluding what's happened in the plot just before it.
I think more shows need those kinds of episodes where you can just sit and breathe and sit in the characters and the information that you're receiving, because everything being cut down to only 8 episodes and having no room to breathe, I just think makes for worse television. We're spending more money on less story, and I'm frankly baffled by that.
Why are you cheering, Fry? You're not rich.
True, but someday I might be rich, and then people like me better watch their step.
And I think having such a big budget has actively ruined Doctor Who, and I mean that. I mean, I think Disney being involved has also been a big part of the ruining of Doctor Who. I mean that too. But big budget and Disney kind of go hand in hand in the inslopification of things. Obviously, Disney is kind of patient zero for the ensloppification of things. You look at Marvel, you look at the live action Disney remakes, you look at all the Star Wars TV shows. That's all Disney's fault. You look at the reboot of Daredevil, which was much less good than the original show, and that's all Disney's fault. The way the industry has changed in the last 15 years, that's all Disney's fault. They set that precedent. What pisses me off about that is that they don't then suffer any of the consequences from it. They'll continue raking in bajillions of dollars. They'll crush every IP they own along the way until people get sick of it, people disregard it, people no longer want to hear about it, people don't tune in anymore. But it doesn't matter, because if Disney stomps that into the ground, they have 100 other IPs they can reach back in and try and throw into the dirt instead. It's just exhausting, and it's frustrating, and I don't want to have to watch it anymore. I don't want to watch Disney ruin my favorite show.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now! They fly now!
And it's frustrating because it's been a long time since Doctor Who was my favourite show. First 5 seasons of Doctor Who are my favourite show ever. I have said it before, I will say it again, I would not be alive today if I didn't have Doctor Who. Unironically, and without hyperbole, Doctor Who saved my life numerous times as a kid. When I was living in an abusive household, I was not religious. I did not pray to God. I prayed to the Doctor to come and save me. When the show started going downhill, I took it really personally. You know, the last couple of Matt Smith seasons, the last season of Matt Smith stuff wasn't great. Aspects of Peter Capaldi's seasons weren't great. I think he was a phenomenal Doctor. I don't think he was given the best writing he could have been given. And I'm very tired of trying to argue with people who are like, people are just mean to Peter Capaldi's seasons. They were actually phenomenal. No. Some parts of Peter Capaldi's seasons were phenomenal. Overall, on balance, not great. Jodie Whittaker's were worse. Way worse. Way worse. Chris Chibnall deserves jail. And what's frustrating about that is that I love Broadchurch. Broadchurch is in like my top 30 TV shows ever made. I think it's phenomenal. I think Chris Chibnall should only write crime shows. Go do that for a living, because you're so good at it. If you had only ever done that, I would have never had a bad word to say about you. But then you showran some of the worst seasons of Doctor Who ever put to television. What's really baffling about that is that these past few episodes and seasons of Doctor Who show run by Russell T Davies have been so disappointing to people that they're now putting on rose-coloured glasses when they talk about Chibnall's era. They're like, well, it's not this bad. Bestie! Just because this season is worse does not mean that those were better! Holy shit, they're just bad for different reasons! And I love Jodie Whittaker. I do. I wish she had been given good material to work with, because holy shit, she wasn't. I also, and this is not related to anything else, this is just a personal gripe that I've been holding on to for 10 years, I wish that I had never found out that she didn't go back and watch Doctor Who after she was cast. She did an interview around the time that her first season was airing, where she talks about the fact that she hasn't gone back and watched any of the other performances because she doesn't want to be influenced.
Gosh. Ah, no, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. That's so stupid. Dan, draw me sunglasses.
And it pissed me off. Not because I think that you should have to go watch every episode of Doctor Who in order to play the Doctor, but because it's kind of one of those shows where, because you're essentially playing the same guy but different, it's not like Hamlet, right? When you do Hamlet on the West End, you're doing it in your own way. It's the same exact performance every single night, and somebody else has acted it before you, and they might have acted it in a completely different way to you. They might have acted a lot of bits the same, they might have acted some bits the same, they might have acted none bits the same, but doing theatre, you are kind of always living in a world where you are doing the performance in your own way, and as influenced by the people that came before you and will come after you, right? That's how theatre works. Doctor Who is not that. Doctor Who is not James Bond or Hamlet. They are their own thing, which means that in order to successfully portray them in a way that feels fresh and new, without feeling like you're copying previous seasons, you kind of have to watch the previous seasons, or at least some episodes of the previous seasons, to get a gauge of what not to do, if you know what I mean. Chris Eccleston's Doctor feels different from David Tennant's Doctor, feels different from Matt Smith's Doctor, feels different to Peter Capaldi's Doctor. Jodie's Doctor kind of feels like a washed out version of all of those things. If anything, it feels kind of like the sort of middle ground between David and Matt's version, and not in a positive way. And again, I'm not blaming Jodie for that, but I do wish that somebody in the writer's room had been like, hey girl, you should watch these episodes so that you can make your performance intrinsically different, so that you're more engaging as your own version of the Doctor. Because by trying to avoid watching the previous performances so that she could be her own version of the Doctor, she kind of wrote herself into a corner, and I think that's unfortunate. I think it made for a worse performance, and I think the writing didn't help. I think it's not her fault. I think the writing is the main thing that was the problem, but that also worked to me. It pisses me off that people are now sort of retroactively claiming that the Chibnall seasons were good, because no, They weren't. They were the thing that made me quit the show. I watched Jodie's first season, and I was so disappointed and so upset at the quality of the writing that I literally quit the show. Something I had never done in my entire life. I don't quit shows that I hate watching, but Doctor Who going downhill that badly made me actively refuse to ever pick it up again. And then, you know, a few years passed, and I went back and I rewatched her last season. It wasn't good, but I rewatched it because Judy had become the Doctor. And I didn't want to go into his seasons not having seen all the build up to it. So I went back and rewatched her final season. It's not good. I think she'd come into the role a bit more, but she still wasn't being helped by any of the writing. In fact, she was being actively hindered by it. And then David Tennant came around. And I disagree with the people that say that 14 is just 10 reheated, because he's not. He's a very different Doctor. And for the most part, I did agree with bringing David Tennant back, because I think it did a good job of revitalizing a lot of people's love for the show. It made me start watching it again after a few years of actively avoiding hearing about it because it pained me so much. And I think that his specials were fine. They weren't the best thing the show has ever made. They weren't the worst thing the show has ever made, not by a fucking long shot. But I think they did a good job of setting up Judy. I think they did a good job of establishing a tone. I don't love the weird gender essentialism that happens in one of the episodes, especially considering like there's that whole line about, you know, oh, you're not a woman, so you don't understand.
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood.
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
When literally, like, a couple days earlier, he had been a woman. Like, the Doctor of all people has a non-binary view on life. Like, he has experienced life as all people, as all genders. He's also experienced thousands of years of life of all people. They have a valid perspective on gender in any conversation about gender. So it's very fascinating that that was the choice they chose to make. And also it's a weird choice. And I know that they were trying to do it as a way of being like, fuck you, J.K. Rowling. And I do appreciate that in that context. But in another context, it's like, but you're subscribing to gender essentialism by saying that, like, if you're not a woman, even a trans woman, you don't understand. Like, in order to understand things, you have to either be a woman or be a trans woman. And it's like, no, you can, as an empathetic person, understand the plight of womanhood without being a woman. I don't like that we're drawing a line between the genders and saying this is this and this is this. I think that sets a bad precedent. Anyway, not the point. The point is, they were better. The show was better. The show was better with Russell T Davies back, and it was better with David Tennant back, and it was better with Judy at the helm, and I was so fucking excited to see Judy Gatwas Doctor. I was so excited. I love that man. I love that man. Judy, if you're watching, I know you're not. If you're watching, I love you. I want to be your best friend. You seemed like the coolest guy, and I was so excited. And he did a great job. But the writing fucked him over in a way that I think I can compare to Jodie Whittaker. Somebody pointed out on Twitter, numerous people pointed out on Twitter, that Christopher Eccleston had less episodes than Judy Gatwa, and he left more of an impact. And I would agree. And I think that's because Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, much as Christopher Eccleston had a hard time with the production and is deservedly quite angry at that period of his life on the show, his character was written well and consistently. All of the other characters were written well and consistently. I also think it's kind of amazing that Rose as a protagonist is so obviously working class in every single way. Every new planet they go to, every new timeline they go to, she befriends the most working class person in her vicinity. She doesn't understand the point of having all that opulence and money and power if you're not using it to help other people. She's a brilliant companion.
How much do you get paid? £8 a year, miss. How much? I know. I would have been happy with 6. I did that job once. I was a dinner lady. Not that I'm calling you a lady. Although I don't know, you might be. Do you actually get paid, though? Do they give you money?
And a lot of people sort of clown on people now for being so in love with Rose because the show has, I think, taken the love of Rose to an extent that some people I think felt wasn't fair, and that there were other companions that were equally deserving of praise. But season 1 Rose, hell, season 2 Rose as well. But like season 1 Rose, her establishment as a character is perfect. She's a perfect character. She's a perfect companion because she has flaws and because she is a working class 19-year-old. That's something that a lot of fucking people can relate to, especially now when the economy is worse than it has literally ever been. And yet all the companions in the last couple of years, some of them have even been working class, but it's been through this veneer of style. We don't want to address their working classness, really. Skim over it in a lot of scenarios. Like, Ruby should be constantly commenting on the wealth disparity between everything happening. She should be confused and stressed out. And there's another video I watched recently where he talks about the fact that no one reacts to things anymore, and I think that's part of the problem in movies, and I would agree with that. Like, Ruby not reacting in the dance scene with all the monsters as if it's weird, because it fucking is part of why that scene, I think, feels so jarring to a lot of people. You have to drench the scene in realism in order for somebody to get it. Like, part of why the first season of Doctor Who is so fucking good is because every new scene that they enter with Rose, for the first few episodes, she's just constantly horrified and confused and taken aback by everything that's happening. Like, even when she's excited by something, it's still excited with this air of like, oh my god, what the fuck is going on?
But it's bad in a very different kind of way, a Disney kind of way. To be explicitly clear, isn't because the Doctor is black or because there are trans people in it. Those things are good, and we learn about them both through her reaction, specifically that she is rendered speechless by awe-inspiring sights, and that he is not. Then we watch her processing and navigating this very foreign situation throughout the rest of the episode. She asks a ton of questions about what she's seeing.
What are they doing on board this spaceship? I thought the continent shifted and things. He's blue.
Yeah. It dawns on her that she's traveling with a bit of a wild card. She realizes she's very out of place, not just because there are aliens, but because the aliens all still are somehow in a higher social class than her. And so she befriends another normal working class person later in the episode because she's finally found something comfortable and familiar. Most importantly, she reaches a point of questioning herself, her decisions, and this strange man she ran off to the future with. All these responses tell us so much about her, the other characters, and her surroundings. Ultimately, she decides, despite having been terrified for her life, that she can't just go back home and wants to keep traveling with the Doctor. That's a very specific person. We don't learn everything about the Doctor in this episode, and that's actually good because we're sharing Rose's perspective.
Ruby Sunday just sort of takes everything in stride. A lot of characters and shows do that, as he pointed out in his video, but like, that's part of the other problem, right? We've got all this big budget, all this big spectacle, we're pumping money into these shows to make them as big as fucking possible, and then all the characters just react like it's normal.
Instead, Ruby Sunday, the character who they named that, looks out at a planet she doesn't recognize and goes, wow, humans really stayed alive, huh? Then turns to the Doctor and says, but wait, you were also sad a minute ago, but happy now. And he takes a scene to explain his entire personal philosophy and why he chooses to not be sad anymore because he gets to see space. Ruby is such a bizarre human being in this show. She is so detached from everything around her, it's like she's on a carnival ride. In her first episode, she ends up on a flying pirate ship full of baby-eating goblin puppets, and she just kind of has this expression the whole time. And then it turns into a musical, and she joins in. Like she's been waiting for this moment her whole life. Like she never just needs a minute. You know? It's weird. We never get to process anything that happens because she never has to. It makes sense that the Time Lord isn't phased, like this is a vacation for him, but she should not be able to handle this. It's that contrast that keeps us grounded in reality no matter how many goblin puppets are on screen and tells us what is unique about each of these people. Without it, we'll just brush right past completely absurd behavior because we don't know what's supposed to be normal.
It's so fucking weird. It's so weird. Okay, there's this episode of Tudor's second season with Belinda, like her introductory episode where you find out that she doesn't want to be a mother or a wife. We'll come back to that. Then you find out that she's being dragged to a planet where these people have based their entire religion, or to a star or whatever, where their entire religion is based around her existence. It turns out that it's her incel ex-boyfriend who's been plugged into this system, right? And there is quite a good element of like body horror there, and it's quite a well done sequence where she's like, oh my god, this is horrifying, right? And one of the best sequences in that episode is where the Doctor is telling her in code that he's trying to help her.
Then the AI generator conquered them. Word. Robots faulty cannot hear every ninth word.
So, thank you very much. Very, very much. Gotcha.
I think that is a really cool thing, a really cool device, and they used it like twice. You could have written an entire episode around that constraint, and it would have been fucking awesome. It would have been so interesting. People would have praised you for your writing ability to be able to have to, like using iambic pentameter, right? Constantly having to count the syllables. It would have been so cool. And instead it's like, no, let's brush it aside. And I think, you know, the episode that came out did okay. I think it was a decent episode for what it was. But then obviously it's ruined by the finale where it goes back and it goes, actually, it's kind of great when an incel guy destroys people's lives in order to have his fantasies be made manifest. And it's funny because like the show doesn't say that directly, but like, yes, it fucking does.
And obviously there's like the sleeper conservative ideology of setting up a villain with noble motivations and then
making them go way too far in order for them to be seen as actually evil, a la what they do in the Eurovision episode, which I have a big problem with. There's also the conservative sleeper ideology of just how misogynistic these last couple of episodes were. I think it almost irks me more because it's masquerading as feminism, and considering there were so many women involved in this final episode of the show, like, maybe more women than there has ever been in an episode of Doctor Who. Like, it's so many women, it's caked in women, and yet it still feels regressive. Because not one of them is a whole person. Not a single woman in this entire show. And I'm including Ruby and Belinda in that. They get the barest minimum versions of characterization, and even then, those characterizations are clearly up for debate because they throw Belinda's away. With the exception of maybe Ruby, they're all kind of inconsequential, and they're all folded into Conrad's little wish world, which I will get to in a minute. But even when they get their personalities back from Conrad's wish world, it's like it doesn't matter. Like, there's no impact at all. And Belinda is reduced to being a mother, and it's aggravating because that literally flies in the face of the character we were first introduced to. And that would be okay if you then spent the entire rest of the season showing her come around to the idea, but you didn't. You introduced a character and you said, this is a woman who does not want to be a wife and mother. She wants to do her job and build a career for herself. And then at the end of the series, you had her throw an entire life away with the doctor and everything for a baby that is actually not hers. It's not a real baby. I mean, it is a real baby, but it's not her real baby. And it's so bizarre.
We've had a baby.
In a single day.
And to be clear, I don't think that being a mother is being reduced. As a feminist, I believe that every choice that you make for your own autonomy is a feminist one, regardless of whether you choose to be a stay-at-home mother, whether you choose to be a working mother, whether you choose to never have kids at all. The difference between me and trad wives is that I acknowledge that feminism is the thing that gives women today the safety to be stay-at-home mums without ruining their entire lives. But having Belinda's only defining character trait in the finale of the show be that she's somebody's mother is reductive and embarrassing. It sucks. It's bad characterization, and it's deeply regressive conservative bullshit. It's extremely misogynistic that Kate Lethbridge-Stewart is just kind of there to be flirted with by a man, and then spout occasional bits of expository dialogue and then say that we're all the Doctor's children, because that's fucking weird.
You save all of us. Sometimes I think we're all your children.
It's extremely misogynistic that Mel is sidelined for the entire episode and basically only gets to say a couple of snarky lines to the Rani, which, by the way, would have made for some really great toxic Yuri. I know you felt the chemistry, it was crazy.
And Melanie, we meet again. I thought you'd be dead. I thought there's no way that painted doll of a princess could ever survive. I never thought about you once. Oh, you thought of me every night.
Rani.
It's extremely misogynistic that both of the women who are the Rani spend the entire episode attempting to bring back Omega, who is, within the context of the episode, gendered male.
Omega, creator of the Time Lords, our Lord and Master. No one is Lord and Master of me.
And then one of them gets eaten, the other one disappears, and that's it. That's the end of their storyline. Like, it's fine to have the Rani wanting to bring back Omega. That's fine. But can you see how in an episode where there is multiple things happening that are reductive to women, having your two big villainous women characters essentially be reduced to a conduit for a male villain that then just sort of exists and is scary for the sake of scary and doesn't have any characterization of its own is kind of reductive and embarrassing? Just for a fucking two Ranis joke? Are you kidding me?
So much for the two Ranis. It's a good night from me.
There are so many other ways you could have executed that joke that would have been better. Also, you had Archie Punjabi in this show? You had her? Are you kidding me? I've waited years for this shit. You had her and you wasted her. That is the most locked in I have seen somebody in a Doctor Who episode in like seasons of television. That woman was locked the fuck in. I was so excited to see her. She did such a good job and you wasted her. That's a hate crime in and of itself.
That you sprang from my loins. That's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard.
Her version of the Rani could have become a recurring villain like the Master. She could have kept showing up, and instead, she got eaten and Mrs. Flood's version of the Rani is alive, ? And it's like, okay, she was fine, but she very clearly wasn't given much characterization except to show up ominously every episode and make googly eyes at the camera. Like, Archie Punjabi was the only one that had, like, flair, viv, characterization. It could have been fucking awesome, and instead she just got eaten because, you know, haha lol, isn't it so funny that we set up this big villain and then she just gets taken out immediately? LMAO! Comedy! I also think that Poppy being there is a problem. I think it's very clearly written to be Ruby's child. That was like, because Ruby was the one that met her.
Oh.
They very clearly wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know what to do. Instead of scrapping the storyline, they went, we'll just make her Belinda's child, even though that doesn't suit Belinda's characterization at all. But having Poppy exist and having the Doctor's entire reason for regenerating being to bring Poppy back is also deeply problematic to me, because the Doctor has this whole speech.
Into the vortex to jolt it 1 degree.
Giving your life.
A life for a life. Because I saved the world at the expense of one person, and that is no world at all.
There won't be any worlds. If you rupture the time vortex, you could damage the whole of creation.
Is that why you're here?
Hey, bestie, I watched the show. Remember that show that's been airing for 20 years? The thing that I've been invested in for most of my life? You know that show that you're currently making? Plenty of people have died in it. In fact, some of the most impactful episodes and scenes of Doctor Who are scenes where characters have died, because enabling the kinds of stakes where characters die makes for a more fleshed out, well-written show. Also, he, shifts reality to bring Poppy back, right? She's been erased from history. And that's aggravating in and of itself, because there were other storylines in Doctor Who where things got erased from history that then didn't come back or that were fundamentally changed. Mavity being a hilarious example. It's more frustrating because she didn't exist. She's from a different reality. She was not real. That's like making Donna give up traveling with the Doctor for those children she had in the Silence of the Library episode. And those 2 children were actually real. They were somebody else's children, but at least they were fucking real. And you can't just justify by being like, oh, well, things were real to them. Okay. So? Do you know how much previous Doctor Who has basically said the opposite of that over the years? Do you know how annoying Nine would find that? Considering that Nine's entire character is marred by how broken he is at the things he's had to lose, at the people he consistently loses along the way. Are you kidding me? Do you think that Nine, if he could, would not choose to bring back the people he lost? Their justification for it seems to be that, oh, but it was the Doctor's child. The Doctor had a child. And also making it so that the Time Lords are sterile, by the way. Terrible character design, terrible choice, terrible. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. Having it so that the Doctor will give up anything for his child is kind of also shit and reductive and makes the Doctor as a character look bad, because, oh, he's willing to rewrite the entire reality for his baby that isn't his baby, but shut the fuck up, is his baby, whatever, but he won't do it for all of those other characters previously? Why? Were they not related to him enough? Again, this is a fake reality. 10 literally had a double episode special where he lived as John Smith for a long time. He built a life. He fell in love. And then he gave that up because that's not who the Doctor is.
Could you change back?
Yes.
Will you?
No.
Russell T Davies, why do I know your show better than you? And I don't think it's what they're going for, but it feels very conservative family-centric to be like, well, we can lose everything, but we can't lose the fucking picket fence family, which is crazy, because the whole point of Conrad's Wish World was that that's not reality. And yet the Doctor tried to make it reality. Are you hearing what I'm hearing? And again, I don't think it's what they're going for, but it does feel just a little bit pro-lifey. Just like a little bit, just like a touch pro-lifey. Not as pro-lifey as the literal pro-life moon egg episode, but we're getting into that territory, besties. It's not the moment. The Doctor as a character, literally fundamentally built into the bones of his characterization, is meant to lose people. He is a Time Lord. Not only will he live longer than literally anybody else that he knows, but he will regenerate into a new person that the people he loves don't know. Literally one of the core facets of them as a character is that they lose people. And the fact that they lose people makes them who they are. That's why the speech at the end of The Doctor Dances is so fucking impactful.
Everybody lives, Rose. Just this once. Everybody lives.
Just once. And he's so excited about it because it means something. It's kind of the whole thesis of the show. They are destined to lose people, and they are trying so hard all of the time to lose as few people as possible. And it's futile, but they will keep doing it anyway. Insert Sarah Jane quote here.
The universe has to move forward. Pain and loss, they define us as much as happiness or love, whether it's a world or a relationship. Everything has its time, and everything ends.
But the idea that suddenly you can rewrite the entire universe, you can rewrite reality, just because she's a cute baby? Who you have claimed as your own? And also, can we just dig in? Sorry, I'm getting away from the tangent I wanted to be on, which was about misogyny. Can we dig into the fact that they talk about the fact that this is his baby, right? In the reality world, this baby exists. But again, the baby wasn't conceived, right? The baby, they have a scene where she's like, oh, I don't remember how long I was in labor for. But it is the doctor's baby, right? They say this in the episode. Whatever. He of all people should know that that is unreality. He of all people should be fighting against that. And it's so aggravating that they're like, yeah, but Belinda's a mother now, and the doctor supports her. Therefore, the narrative does too. Why don't you support that? Because it's misogynistic and weird and conservative and weird. And I don't understand how this was greenlit by so many people. Like, okay, when River, spoilers, died in her literal introductory episodes, that is perfect character writing in this kind of a show. They locked in a perfect tragedy, which meant that every single time River reappeared after that, no matter how fun and silly and wacky it got, it was always with the knowledge that we know what happens to her at the end. That's a tragedy, but it's so beautifully written, and being able to reverse that would massively fuck over her entire character.
The two of you, because I want you to know that if this is the last night, I expect you to find a way round it.
Not everything can be avoided. Not forever.
Oh, for heaven's sake. He just can't do it, can he? That man, that impossible man. He just can't give in.
It's also misogynistic to Poppy, let's be clear about that. Reducing her down, this character down, to one thing, to just a receptacle for motherhood and childbirth and existence. Like, we already had a big childbirth plotline with Amy that was handled much more successfully, but, like, that's reductive to her. Not that I loved her characterization in Space Babies, because I think Space Babies is one of the weakest episodes of the show, but, like, there was something there. Poppy in the finale does fuck all, except sit there and smile occasionally. The Doctor literally had flashbacks to his own granddaughter, who, by the way, did not even appear in the fucking episode. So he'll change reality for a baby that is not his and didn't exist, but he can't go and visit his fucking granddaughter? I understand that was probably part of the reshoots, but what the actual fuck? Every woman in this episode was reduced to nothing! God, even fucking Billie Piper was reduced to nothing. She's not there because they're bringing Rose back. She's not there because they want to explore the interesting idea of the Doctor taking a companion's face. She's there because they wrote a finale, they didn't know how to deal with it, and they tacked it on the last minute because they were like, well, people liked Rose once upon a time. Yeah, we sure did. We like her less when you keep trotting her back out just to dick tease everybody. It's not fair to her or her characterization to keep telling her stories in ways that frustrates everybody. Rose Tyler in seasons 1 and 2 is a perfect character. I can even handle her coming back at the end of Donna's season. I think that was handled extremely well. Billie Piper coming back for the 50th anniversary special, I think was fine. It was clearly the point at which it started to grate on a lot of people's nerves, but it was fine. But you clearly don't know what you're doing with this character or this actress, and it's frustrating and it's boring. She's just there because they killed off Judy and then they just wanted a way to keep people talking. That's it. That's reductive. That's misogynistic. It's not the most misogynistic thing in the world, but can you see how baked into the episode the misogyny is? There are so many more interesting things you could do, and you're doing none of them. Obviously, this whole video is mostly about Doctor Who, but this is a prestige TV problem. This is a TV problem, period. The Last of Us 2 has had enough backlash this season. I'm not the only person who noticed how kind of misogynistic the whole show was. How it reduced Ellie's character to nothing. How it kept overstating things all the time. You don't need to have Abby tell Pedro Pascal he's handsome. We're all aware.
You actually are pretty handsome. Congrats on that.
The way that these writers keep treating female characters is aggravating. And some of it falls into this like girl boss feminism, which is like a lost relic of the 2010s, especially in media, where by just making a female character kind of strong and sassy, you can avoid doing anything of actual depth with a character because people will just go, oh, but look, she's so strong, therefore she feminist. And that's just not true. I think House of the Dragon falls into this a lot, and it has a lot better character writing for women than a lot of other shows do, but even it as a show still falls into the pitfalls of just making the women kind of badass and then not expanding on that enough to be interesting. Rings of Power did that shit. Dune Prophecy did that shit. Dune Prophecy did that shit to an embarrassing degree. Percy Jackson did that shit. They didn't give Annabeth anything to do. Not that Percy Jackson gave any of the characters anything to do except be exposition machines. That's a whole separate video that I'm making, but still. You look at The Idol, which I've made videos on. You look at a lot of Supernatural. Like, they got in trouble for how they used women a lot in that show. And again, you look at all those reboots of the classic teen shows. Gossip Girl, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Pretty Little Liars, Winx Saga, Titans. A lot of them use this girl bossification feminism that is actually deeply misogynistic. Half the shows on television that are lauded as being prestige TV have this problem. And now that I've pointed out, I don't know if you'll ever be able to unsee it, but I think Doctor Who was the final nail in the coffin for me. I think if I see shows now that exist like that are misogynistic like that, I don't think I can watch them anymore. It makes me feel icky.
Brother, pardon me? You can't simply just put it to the other extreme and assume us to all be like, oh yes, it's reclaimed? No. Wife pleaser? Brother, ew. Icky.
It makes me feel complicit in creating a narrative around feminism that is just big, strong, sassy woman good, any other kind of woman, Every other line in the finale of Doctor Who from a woman was sassy or snarky, and none of it had any fucking depth. I also think that the precedent the show sets in the finale, politics-wise, is really fucking dodgy, not just on the misogyny front. Like, the show correctly identifies that one of the main problems we're facing as a society today, one of the main threats to democracy, is uneducated idiots with podcasts. Specifically, uneducated incels with podcasts. They are correct. They pointed this out in the first episode of the season with Belinda's shitty ex-boyfriend. They pointed this out in the Conrad episode where he is literally a threat to the world because he's a podcaster spreading conspiracy theories. And then they combined those two arcs in the finale by making Conrad not only the same guy that was a conspiracy theorist podcaster, the worst of humanity, but then also made it so that he created a wish world where everything's all 50s-y and weird. And then the show kind of like redeems him. Ruby's final wish is that he's just happy. She just wants him to be happy and to get what he wants. And like, ew. Brother, ew. Brother, no. Icky. There are so many characters in the show that you could make a case for having a redemption arc, and he didn't really get an arc so much as like, no, it's fine. But like, there is a point at which, and I will talk about this in my upcoming video because I have so many thoughts, there is a point at which forgiveness in a narrative becomes a dangerous precedent. There have been episodes of Doctor Who that have focused on forgiveness. There's the famous Town Called Mercy episode that, again, had mixed reviews. Tackling forgiveness arcs, tackling the validity of somebody apologizing for their past behavior is not a bad thing inherently, but it is when you create a character who is extremely unapologetic, doesn't give a fuck, and then you have one of our main characters, the character we're supposed to root for and see ourselves in, go, he just a sad little, he's okay, he's just a sad little boy, we should cuddle him, he just wanted to be happy. Fuck you. Actually fuck you. And like, from the bottom of my heart, fuck you, because that is dangerous. That is legitimizing those feelings as valid. That is legitimizing those actions as valid. You can show mercy, you can be forgiving, but to show a character who literally does not repent or apologize for any of his behavior, bar saying kind of sorry-ish, that's unacceptable to me. There are characters that the Doctor has dismissed from his life for far less than what Conrad did, and yet, the misogyny and forgiveness narratives is something I am going to talk about in my next video. It hurt me more watching this because this show has been so good at not falling into that trap.
Cowards like you, weaponizing lies, taking people's insecurity and fear and making it currency. You are exhausting. You stamp on the truth. choke our bandwidth, and shred our patience. Because the only strategy you have is to wear us down.
I think Doctor Who needs to end again. I think it needs to get cancelled again so that it can come back from the dead with a new showrunner and a new outlook on the show. I think that we need to get showrunners in who specifically care about classic Who more than New Who. I love New Who, but like, we need to have a diverse writers' room, which this season did, thank fucking God, but we didn't do anything with them, really. Bummer for everyone involved. So much of the plots of these shows, the settings of these shows, the characters of these shows, and the writers' rooms of these shows feels like tokenism. We're not utilizing them to tell good stories. We're just going, see, we hired a trans writer. See, we hired a black writer. See, we set an episode in Nigeria. It's not good enough. And it's especially not good enough when you devote 2 separate episodes to a podcasting piece of shit conspiracy theorist and then give him a happy ending. Belinda becoming a mother and then being relegated to the background of the entire last episode and then just never undoing that at all is like fascinating to me. Poppy being her baby is fascinating to me. Ruby showing up just for the Doctor and Belinda to be fucking mean to her is fascinating. And the fact that the Doctor is so clearly, before the refilms, the Doctor is so clearly lying about not remembering to Ruby to make Belinda feel better. The way it's being acted is so clearly the Doctor doing his wink wink nudge nudge thing, and then to not resolve that in the episode, so it turns out actually no, the Doctor just is being a dick to Ruby the last time he's ever going to see her, is infuriating. Like, actively infuriating. And that's character assassination. Not my boy. Not my boy. Maybe some of the other versions of the Doctor would have done that. Maybe. I can see David Tennant's Doctor. I can see Ten on his worst day doing something like that. I can see Matt Smith on his worst day doing something like that. But the worst thing is that within the context of the episode, that isn't framed as Chudi's worst day. It's not framed as 15's worst day. And that pisses me off. That should be framed as him going too far, as him going over the edge in the way that all of 10's shittiness and 11's shittiness was. It should be put into the context of what it is, and it just keeps being brushed past, and it pisses me off. Why in his last episode are we making him kind of a shit? We're mischaracterizing all of these fucking characters, and it's infuriating. We're taking all of this money, and we're putting it towards the spectacle, and we're not putting it towards the writing, or the characterization, or the drafting, or the rewrites, or the edits. And I just don't understand that, because stories live in the edits. I mean that with every facet of my being. Stories live in the edits. Everything, every piece of writing that exists, every movie, every script, every poem, every novel, they live and die in the edits. The online joke about fan fiction being less good than novels is hilarious, because I've read some fan fiction that is up there with some of the best novels I've read, and I've read some novels that are down there with the worst fanfic I've ever read. Thank you, Colleen Hoover. And so much of that I think could be solved by just pointing out that fanfic writers don't have editors. For the most part. Some of them have beta readers, but for the most part, they're doing it for funsies. And so if you take a fanfic writer and you give them an editor, you're going to end up with a lot higher quality writing. You know, when I write fanfic, I'm not doing it because I want to have the most polished product at the end. I'm doing it because I have an idea in my brain. I just need to get it out. When I write novels, I rewrite them because I want them to be something I am okay with other people spending their money on. It is kind of embarrassing to me that we have reached a point in a media landscape where our TV shows aren't ashamed to expect money for writing that they haven't spent any fucking money on, for writing that they haven't spent any money editing. Why should I give you my time, which in this political landscape is literally money? That's how streaming services work. When you haven't spent any of your time or money on making it the best story for me to watch. I'm genuinely asking, why should I go and see the live action Disney Lilo and Stitch movie when it so clearly flies in the face of everything the original stood for, when you clearly haven't put any work into making it worth watching? Why should I do any of that? I'm genuinely asking. What's the point? And it frustrates me more because I watch so much Asian television, and there's so many Thai dramas and Chinese dramas and Korean dramas and Japanese dramas and Taiwanese dramas that tell good stories with no fucking budget and with constraints and with a lot less leeway from their countries. I'm still working on the video about Chinese bromance dramas, where the point of that video is that some of the best dramas in the world exist because they're not allowed to tell a gay love story. So they have to tell it in the margins. They have to use subtext for everything. They have to talk around every single gay plot point in every single one of those novels in order to make them into a show that China won't censor beyond belief. They're so good at doing it. It's so successful. It's created some of the best television to ever exist. And again, I don't like the Hays Code. I don't think that those kinds of constraints are good, but I think that writers, when trying to work around constraints of any kind, do some of their best work. And I think Russell T Davies having no constraints, people constantly just saying yes to whatever he does instead of going, do you think maybe this might not be a good idea? Disney just throwing budget at the show and not really caring how good the writing is as long as the spectacle looks good. The lack of constraints on all fronts, I think, has absolutely fucked over Doctor Who, and by extension, every other show in existence. And that's why things like The Pit, I think, have become more popular in the last year. People are finding shows that are smaller scale. Obviously The Pit has some budget, but like smaller scale character-focused stories, people are salivating over. Severance. Obviously the budget's a bit bigger, but smaller plot, character-driven shows are the ones that have the staying power. Those big blockbuster shows and movies are going to have very little staying power in the cultural zeitgeist over the next 50 years, and I guarantee you that, if we haven't all succumbed to the heat death of the universe by then. You know, even the best parts of the most recent seasons of Stranger Things were the parts that hinged on character development, individual character moments, right? It wasn't the big spectacle, it was individual character growth. And it just upsets me that we're living in a world where we'll give a huge budget to that terrible Electric State movie that does not understand the fucking source material that it was based on, and throws two of the least charismatic Hollywood people into it and then just slams a bunch of disgusting, ugly CGI over it, and then goes, why didn't people like it? I don't understand. Why didn't people like it? Why didn't people like the movie? I don't get it.
What's wrong with you?
Took your freaking time, didn't you?
Cool your jets.
Let's go. I am not dying of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch!
I actually like this song. Stuck on this!
Inappropriate.
Really?
It's not that hard. It's not that hard to understand. It's really not. Just tell a good fucking story.
All stories in the end. Just make it a good one, eh?
I don't understand why this has become such a baffling thing for people. Just tell a good fucking story. And I say that like it's easy, and it's not. As somebody who writes stories, I was going to say for a living, I don't make money for it, who writes stories because I'm compelled to, because I'm a writer, because it exists in my bones and I have to do it all of the time. It's hard to write a good story. You get halfway through a story and you realize it's going nowhere. You get 2/3 of the way through a story and then realize that actually you're going to need to rewrite the entire first half in order for it to make any cohesive sense. Stories are hard to get right, but when you hire people who like writing them, who want to get it right, when you hire editors and storyboarders and showrunners who give a fucking shit, you end up creating something worthwhile and things that are remembered, shows that are remembered, shows that have impact on culture and history. And I don't like this idea that like, oh, it's a TV show, it's not that serious, it's not that serious, it's not that serious. Because honestly, it's one of the only things we have left to save us from this constant march towards cultural destruction. ChatGPT and AI learning modules and bullshit are destroying culture. They are making us stupider, and good television and good books and good culture to interact with as a human being is kind of the only thing that we have, like a sandbag, to keep that fucking flood from reaching us. Keeping your brain alert and alive is only possible through engaging meaningfully with literature, art, hell, even fucking science and maths. Right? But in order to engage meaningfully with science and maths, you have to do it from a standpoint of comprehension, which means it has to have been written in a way that is comprehensible. So much of the world is being kept alive off the back of media, and yet we're constantly being told that doesn't matter, and that media is just a distraction for the world falling apart. And maybe for some people it is, but it is also the only thing at the moment that is keeping the world going and keeping people from falling into a void of just dating ChatGPT. Do you want to be Kim Kardashian? Do you want to be having conversations with a fucking ChatGPT model? Is that where you want your life to be? Because if it's not, you need to start reading. You need to start watching TV that is worth watching. You need to start engaging with music and poetry and fucking mathematics. You need to engage with the world around you. And that means the news as well. I'm not discarding that you do need to tune in to what is going on in the world as well, but just in terms of, even when you're trying to switch off, you shouldn't be switching off your brain completely. Fast and the Furious is fun, but If every single movie and TV show is come out with the same level of quality assurance as Fast and the Furious, society's gonna melt. I don't like inciting George Orwell whenever we talk about things like this, but it's already kind of started becoming a bit 1984-ish. The fascism is very much in effect in America right now, and in the UK, and in Israel, and in a bunch of other countries across the world that are just liking to pretend that genocide isn't happening, and that America isn't descending into a fascist state, and that the UK isn't also kind of descending into a fascist state, because it's easier to just, like, not acknowledge that. Can we just try to not let fascism and our slow descent into absolute hell erode our ability to acknowledge when things are worth engaging with? We shouldn't let our media landscape start reflecting the levels of disinterest in intellectualism and intelligence and culture that is happening outside of the media landscape. Even when the Hays Code existed, you had people trying to make movies that exist outside of the Hays Code. Even in China, where there are laws around not making certain kinds of content that people have gotten arrested for, people will continue to make that content. Why are we becoming so content with allowing the things we watch and read and engage with to just be slop? I'm not okay with that. Are you?
You know, when you're a kid, they tell you it's all grow up, get a job, get married, get a house, have a kid, and that's it. The truth is, the world is so much stranger than that. It's so much darker, and so much madder, and so much better.
This video has been absolutely hellish to get done, I swear to God. Firstly, I filmed it during the British heatwave. Smart, I know. Secondly, my mic audio corrupted and entirely glitched out, so I only have about 15 minutes of usable audio, and I had to switch to my camera mic, which is obviously much worse quality. Then I realized that despite writing it down in all caps to discuss while recording, I had not properly elaborated on my problem with the stealth misogyny in the finale, and had to go back and record audio while editing, thankfully with a working mic. This is also, like, the reason why I don't generally do unscripted videos. Like, I'd written down a bunch of dot points to elaborate on, because I didn't want to spend time, like, scripting it out, because I didn't want to waste more time thinking about the finale than I absolutely had to. But I have ADHD, so I have a tendency to go on tangents and to not stick to the dot points. So from now on, I think I'm just going to script everything no matter how small it is. And then I had to spend over a week working out a way for it to actually upload to YouTube without it being claimed into the center of the sun. Thanks BBC and Disney, and fuck both of you. I also realized that I kind of hate making videos where I exclusively talk about something I hate. I know they perform well, but it starts to grate on me after a while, so even though it's probably not optimal for the algorithm, once I've posted my next video essay, which I've already filmed, the forgiveness one that I've been teasing for a long time, I might pivot and do a more fun one or two in the wake of that, just to give my brain something to have a walk with, you know. Recording the video was easy, but editing the video was extremely difficult. I had a really hard time with it. It was very difficult to stay focused on it, kind of like a perception filter. Like, and if anybody has ADHD in my audience, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, where, like, when you don't want to focus on something, it's like a perception filter where your eyes just slide off it no matter how much you try to look at the thing. It's like you can't focus no matter how much you want to. And I got about halfway through editing this video and started to have that problem where, like, I would open up the editing software and I would try so hard to edit something, and I'd just get frustrated because I kept having to go back through a footage of a show that I once loved and now am frustrated with, and find all the parts of the show that I was frustrated with. It bums you out. I also recorded an additional 25 minutes of audio that strayed too far from the points I was making in the video, but I still feel like they're good points, so I'll probably upload those as a Patreon exclusive sometime in the next few days. So if you're interested in more of my opinions on Doctor Who, definitely go take a look at that. And I hope that my complaining is the fun kind that we can bond over, and not the frustrating kind that upsets you. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to my wonderful patrons over at Patreon. First of all, obviously, a huge, enormous, massive shout out to my longtime Patreon, Ian Musa. They are amazing, as per usual. They truly are my Kidari Adashi. I'd also like to thank Candy99 from my Roman Empire, who I also love very dearly. And I'd like to thank my iconic rooftop dwellers, Cast, Dana Brand, Nick Hook, BPs, Ace of Lights, Cal Kale, Best Stressed, Sunshine Shay, Deborah Laban, Sarah Parker Shemmelt, Ghost Porcupine, Callum McLeod of Clan McLeod, Whoop Whoops, Lilac Rose, CS, Rihanna, Carolina, Chris K, E. Teddy, Renelia Delgrange, Jellywa, Sunayama, Tiny Wooden Tree, Tan, and K-Guard. And a final thank you to my wonderful introverts. You can see them all scrolling by. They are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people, and I really appreciate their time and money, and I hope they know that it's because of them that I'm able to continue doing this job even when things are hard and even when like life gets in the way. The fact that I have this Patreon is the reason why I can continue to make videos, so I hope they know how important they are to me, truly. And I hope they're all doing well. And I hope you are all doing well, regardless of whether or not you're on my Patreon, whether you're a patron, a subscriber, whether you're not subscribed at all, and this is the first time you're seeing my video. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and all those other big important YouTube things. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Annyeong!